Read through the Gospels and one of the first things you'll notice is how much eating takes place. Jesus joins people at meals. Jesus miraculously makes meals happen. Jesus tells stories about meals. Meals matter. Last time we looked at 3 stories of eating with Jesus and we learnt that it's okay to eat with the wrong people. We learnt to see social faux pas as opportunities for ministry, and we learnt to meet people's needs. And if you missed those videos, you can find them here. Today we're going to look at a few more of Jesus' meals and learn a few more lessons by eating with Jesus. The Lord and his disciples were travelling along and came to a village. When they got there, a woman named Martha welcomed them into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat down in front of the Lord and was listening to what he said. Martha was worried about all that had to be done. Finally, she went to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it bother you that my sister's left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to come and help me." The Lord answered, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen what is best, and it will not be taken from her." Make time to be with Jesus. We need to be conscious of the need to meet with Jesus. Eating is good, but we're eating with Jesus. In this story, Jesus is at the home of Martha. She's invited her sister Mary to join them, and Mary soon finds herself so entranced by Jesus' teaching that she abandons any convention about helping her sister with the meal preparation. She sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. And soon Martha could bear it no more. She complains to Jesus about her sister's behaviour. Jesus replies, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Jesus' point is that spending time with him should take precedence over whatever other tasks are pressing. He says something similar in Matthew chapter 9 when he's asked why his disciples don't fast. How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he's with them? The time will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then they will fast. He knows that his physical presence among them has an expiry date. Time is of the essence. The priority is to enjoy his company, sit at his feet, soak in his words. There'll be time enough later for fasting or working hard in the kitchen. This story tells us that as important as our everyday tasks and jobs are, nothing is more important than simply spending time with Jesus. We must carve out time to be with Jesus. Come and spend time at Jesus' feet. There'll be time enough for the clearing up later. When Jesus finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him home for a meal. Jesus went and sat down to eat. The Pharisee was surprised if he did not wash his hands before eating, so the Lord said to him, "You Pharisees clean the outside of the cups and dishes, but on the inside you are greedy and evil. You fools, didn't God make both the outside and the inside? If you would only give what you have to the poor, everything you do would please God. You Pharisees are in for trouble. You give God 1/10 of the spices from your garden, such as mint and rue, but you cheat people. You don't love God. You should be fair and kind to others and still give 1/10 to God. You Pharisees are in for trouble. You love the front seats in the marketplace and you like to be greeted with honour in the market. But you are in for trouble. You are like unmarked graves that people walk on without even knowing it." A teacher of the law of Moses spoke up and said, "Teacher, you said cruel things about us." Jesus replied, "You teachers are also in for trouble. You load people down with heavy burdens, but you won't lift a finger to help them carry the loads. Yes, you are really in for trouble. You build monuments to honour the prophets your own people murdered long ago. You must think that was the right thing for your people to do, or else you would not have built monuments for the people, for the prophets they murdered. Because of your evil deeds, the wisdom of God has said, I will send prophets and apostles to you, but you will murder some and mistreat others. You people living today will be punished for all the prophets who have been murdered since the beginning of the world. This includes every prophet down from the time of Abel to the time of Zechariah, who was murdered before the altar in the temple. You people will certainly be punished for this. You teachers of the law of Moses are really in for trouble. You carry the keys to the door of knowledge about God, but you never go in, and you keep others from going in. Jesus was about to leave, but the teachers and Pharisees wanted to get even with him. They tried to make him say what he thought about other things so they could catch him saying something wrong. Upset the self-righteous people. I don't know, Jesus doesn't exactly come out of his dinner party looking great, does he? He's invited to the home of a Pharisee, where he eats a meal with what appears to be a table full of religious leaders and experts in the law. But instead of winning them over with his charm and his wit, he proceeds to berate them mercilessly. In fact, he unloads upon them. 6 times he pronounced woe upon them. He accuses them of being ungenerous to the poor and neglecting justice. He claims that they keep the people ignorant and burden them with religious legalism. He calls them hypocrites, unmarked graves, foolish people. And he declares, inside you are full of greed and wickedness. Now, the unspoken rule of a Middle Eastern meal is never humiliate your host. Don't criticize your food or the conversation. In fact, you praise your host. You praise your host lavishly, regardless of how poor the meal may have been. So why? When Jesus has been polite at previous meals, why has he decided now to throw convention to the winds? What's changed? The religious elite have turned up the heat on their condemnation of Jesus. They were openly calling him a false prophet and claimed that he got his miraculous power from Beelzebub, the demon lord. Then they had the gall to demand that he prove who he was by performing a public miracle. They were testing him, trying to make him look bad, so he attacks them for their part in the Pharisaic tradition that has rejected the prophets of God throughout history. This is a veiled defense of himself against them. But the main concern of his speech is the treatment of ordinary people. To use a contemporary term, he is charging them with perpetuating a toxic religion. Now, the author Lee Grady has described 8 signs of toxic religion. They describe the Pharisees to a T, but sadly, there are plenty of modern-day Pharisees out there. I hope this doesn't sound familiar. If it does, then you need to break free soon. Here are the 8 signs. Toxic religion views God as a cold, harsh, distant taskmaster rather than an approachable, loving father. Toxic religion places an emphasis on doing outward things to show others that God accepts his adherents. Toxic religion develops traditions and formulas to accomplish spiritual goals. Toxic religion becomes joyless, critical, cynical. Toxic religion becomes prideful and isolated, thinking that its righteousness is special and that you cannot even associate with other believers who have different standards. Toxic religion develops a harsh, judgmental attitude towards sinners. Yet those who ingest this poison typically struggle with sinful habits that they cannot admit to anyone else. Toxic religion rejects progressive revelation and it refuses to embrace change. Toxic religion persecutes those who disagree with their self-righteous views and becomes angry whenever the message of grace threatens to undermine their religiosity. Jesus had no time for this kind of religion, and he condemns it in no uncertain terms. So what do we learn from meeting with Jesus in this story? Well, I don't think we necessarily have to call out all the instances of hypocrisy we see, but I do believe we're called to foster a faith community of honesty, integrity, humility, and grace. Please, upset the self-righteous if you need to, but strive for honest, open relationships with God and with each other. One Sabbath, Jesus was having dinner at the home of an important Pharisee, and everyone was carefully watching Jesus. All of a sudden, a man with a swollen leg stood up in front of him. Jesus turned and asked the Pharisee and the teachers of the law of Moses, "Is it right to heal on the Sabbath?" But they didn't say a word. Jesus took hold of the man. Then he healed him and sent him away. Afterwards, Jesus asked the people, "If your son or an ox falls into a well, wouldn't you pull him out right away, even on the Sabbath?" There was nothing that they could say. Jesus saw how the guests had tried to take the best seats. So he told them, "When you're invited to a wedding feast, don't sit in the best place. Someone more important than you may have been invited. Then the one invited you will have to come and say, 'Give your place to the other one.' And you'll be embarrassed and you'll have to sit in the worst place. When you're invited to be a guest, go and sit in the worst place. Then the one who has invited you will come and say, 'My friend, take a better seat.' Then you'll be honoured in front of the other guests. If you put yourself above others, then you'll be put down. But if you humble yourself, then you will be honoured." Then Jesus said to the man who invited him, "When you give a dinner or banquet, don't invite your friends and family and relatives and rich neighbours. If you do, they'll invite you in return and you'll be paid back. When you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. They cannot pay you back, but God will bless you and reward you when his people rise from the dead." Give special honour to the lowly. A dinner party in Jesus' day would look a little different to ones you and I might be familiar with. The biggest difference might be the table. Most parties would be held reclining, that's lying down, around a triclinium. That's a three-sided table. People reclined on cushions with their left elbow and their feet stretched away from the table, and they ate with their right hand. The host would sit in the most prominent place, and at a triclinium, that would be in the centre, in the middle. The guests would be ranked according to their status, from nearest to him to the furthest. Everyone knew their place. No one would attempt to move closer to the host if they weren't of an appropriate level of status. Now, in Western cultures, this is unheard of, but when guests gather at our homes, we tell them, sit wherever you like. In fact, sometimes you like a round table, so there's no head. But even today, sometimes we're used to the ordering of guests. Just think about a wedding reception. Picture the tables for the family, the friends, maybe another for acquaintances or work colleagues. And then there's a strict tradition about who sits at the top table and in what sequence. Jesus picks up on this convention when attending a dinner at a Pharisee's home. He describes a situation where a guest positions himself close to the honoured guest, only to have a person of higher status arrive and bump them down the table. Nothing could be more embarrassing. It would involve a loss of face. Instead, Jesus says, when you're invited, take the lower place, so that when your host comes, you'll say to your friend, move up to a better place. Then you'll be honoured in the presence of all the gathered guests. But this isn't just advice about etiquette. He's restating a principle that he makes many times. In his kingdom, the last will be first, and the first will be last. What prompted this conversation was the fact that Jesus had healed a man on the Sabbath. The Pharisees grumble about him healing the man on the way to the meal. He's breaking the law of Moses by working on the day of rest. And this becomes a primary point of contention for the religious leaders because Jesus is openly flouting the law. He's regularly healing people on the Sabbath. When questioned about it at the meal, Jesus refers to a loophole in the law. If one of you had an ox or a child that falls into a well, would you not immediately pull him out? You see, the law of Moses allowed such work to occur on the Sabbath in cases where there was a risk to life or limb. So his opponents have to fall quiet. They know that the law allows them the discretion to rescue a trapped animal on the Sabbath. And if they continue to object to Jesus healing people on the day, well, then they would appear to value the sick less than an animal. Jesus then offers his hosts some advice for future dinner parties, telling them not to invite just his friends or family who can reciprocate or return the invitation, but to invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, so that he will be blessed. Looking at our society today, I can't but help to imagine what it would actually look like if Jesus were in charge. All the people who are usually invisible, the physically disabled, the mentally challenged, the elderly, the untalented, the shy, the fearful, the uncertain. I think in Jesus' kingdom, they will be given pride of place. And on that upside down kingdom teaching, let's conclude for today. We've learned from eating with Jesus that it's okay to eat with the wrong people. We've learned to see social faux pas as opportunities for ministry. We've learned to meet people's needs. We've learned that we must make time to be with Jesus. We've learned that we can upset the self-righteous people. And we've learned that we must give special honour to the lowly. So let's try to live lives of discipleship and put these lessons of Jesus into practice in our lives and our churches. Let's eat with Jesus. May you find yourself at God's table. May you experience the hospitality of a loving God through the mercy of his Son Jesus in fellowship with the Holy Spirit. Amen.